everybody, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're making an interesting project. We are decorating one of these little notebooks with a fairy door, and it's really sweet, so I hope you'll like it. We're going to sort of vary it up in different ways, so let's crack on, shall we? Okay, here is the rolled out clay for the fairy door. If you've got a pasta machine, it goes through on number 3, which is quite thin, but we don't want the door to be fantastically heavy, do we? Not when it's on the front of a notebook. If you don't have a pasta machine, this is especially for you. It's it's 2 thicknesses of cereal packet, in this case Crunchy Nut cornflakes, taped down, and that way you can roll out your clay and know that it's the right sort of thickness. But we can discard those for a moment, because that's already done. Now, in order to make your door, you need to make a template, and I've made a template on some squared paper. If you look at the size of the book, you want to make the door I don't know, half the width, less than half. You don't want to make it too big, and when you cut out your template, you want your template to be a bit smaller than you want the door to end up being, because we're going to put some edging and things around it. So if you look at that, that's quite a good size, but you know, you might want it to be tiny or go right to the edge. I folded my template along a line down the middle, and a cut round into in this curve, and I drew round something. I think it was some tape, a roll of tape. But yeah, once you get your template planned, you can put it down onto your clay and cut it out. Now, if a child wants to do this, you can probably use this kind of knife, or this weird knife that I made out of a lid, plastic lid. You don't have to use a very sharp blade. The clay's pretty forgiving, it will do mostly what it's told. For the purposes of this, I'm going to use my tissue blade, just because I'm trying to do it quite quickly. So there you go. With an ordinary blade, well, let me not completely cheat, you can just follow your template round with a craft knife. We're going to be doing things to it, so it doesn't have to be completely perfect. And it's unlikely to be perfect because I'm doing it. Right, okay. So let's take off the excess clay, and here is our door. And as we can see, it's fairly neat. I'll just show you that a bit closer up. Oh gosh, sorry. There's always some kind of weird drama next to the template there. Okay, now we want our door to look like it's made of wood, and the way that we do that is quite simple. You can use a knitting needle, or you could use a dotting tool, and what you want to do is just draw some wiggles down the door, and kind of random wiggles. It's hard to do random things, actually. It's not, there's something in human beings that make you want to not be random, but there you go. Some you want to follow the one before, and some not so much. And make sure that you start off the end of the top and you come down off the end of the bottom, because it's wood. We don't want it to stop before the bottom. The grain goes all the way, doesn't it? Where there are little sort of circles missing, you can sort of draw in some shapes. If I just show you how that's going, you can see what I've done there. It's not fantastically difficult. It looks harder than it is, I think. And if it really is, you know, awful, and you think, well, that's rubbish, you can you can just screw it up and start again. It's polymer clay. If you've really defeated, or you just can't be bothered, you can get there's wood grain texture sheets you can get. Okay, so there's our door, but the thing is with it is that it should really be made out of planks or panels, shouldn't it? So I'm going to go along the bottom and divide this up into like 5 or 6, because this is quite small. I'm going to divide it into 5, I think. So I'm going to make some marks. 1, 2. We want them fairly evenly spaced, but they don't have to be perfect because it's meant to be kind of rustic. Now, remember these? Here's one with a very straight edge on it, and I'm going to use that and push it into the clay where I've made those marks. I haven't measured it at the top, but I'm just going to kind of do it as straight as I can. It doesn't matter if it's not completely straight for the reasons I've said before. And just have a look at it, because I tend to do things where everything goes off to the left. So you don't want to do that. But just try, and I'm just going to get that edge at the bottom a little. Now I hope you saw what I did there, because I was looking at what I was doing, not the camera. But yeah, I'm just taking the cardboard and pushing it in. So I'll show you that a bit closer. And as you can see, it now looks like it's made of planks of wood. Okay, now we come on to making the door furniture as such. We want to make the hinges and we want to make the doorknob. So I'm just going to fetch my metallic clay. Yeah. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh my goodness, I'm so ill prepared. Okay, so here is our metallic clay, which I totally forgot I was going to need. And I'm going to squash this up, and this is called conditioning. All clay needs to be conditioned before you use it. This has already been conditioned a lot, but I'm just making it ready for the next stage. Now you can roll this out in the same way as you rolled the other thing out, this bit out. Or you can cheat like me and put it through a pasta machine. I'm just going to do that twice for luck. Okay, so here's my clay. It's been through the pasta machine, and I want to texture it. So I've got this old piece of, it was the inside of a lining for a box. But I really liked it and I thought it would make a good texture. So I'm going to use that to make a texture on my clay. I would have spritzed it with a bit of water, but I seem to be having some sort of weird moment where I can't find anything. Okay, so there's a bit of texture on that now to give it a bit of interest, and I'm going to cut it into a couple of oblongs. Now, once I've shown you this, I'll show you another way to make hinges. It's quite sticky actually. Okay, I'm just going to use one of these oblongs because we won't need two, thinking about it. And I just crisscross the middle there, try and do it as straight as I can. And cut off the ends. Oops, that one's a bit short. There you go. So what I've done there is I've made a couple of little oblongs with points on the end, and they will fit onto there as hinges. Now that looks kind of fat, so I think I'd probably trim it down a little, but that is a simple way to make hinges if you want to. And you can find textures that, you know, suit your needs. That's actually quite sweet, but they are too fat. That's one way of doing it, just creating a little texture and making a geometric shape. The other way you can do it is if you want fantasy ones, like I had on the that pink example, is you can roll a sausage of clay or a snake, roll it down to a point, curl it around like this. It's very hard to see, for me to see what you're seeing. Curl it around, sort of put it back on itself a little, and then flatten it. Now I was using the lid to do that and it was really good, so I'm going to do that again. Flatten it, then take that flattened curl, put it on your door and trim it. And that to me makes a really sweet little hinge. And what I like to do is put a couple of little dots here so that it looks like it's screwed in. Let's find a small enough one. And I'm going to do 2 of those before I show you up close, because I think these are really fun. The only trouble with these curved ones is if you want to make plants with lots of curvy fronds on, then they tend to sort of get a bit too much curviness, like me. So, okay, so there's the other one. I'm going to try and make it the same thickness as that one. Always a pain. And curve it the other way. Flatten it with my lid. All of this I'm having to do really quite quickly and carelessly. You'll be like making a much better job of it, I'm sure. And then I'll cut it there. Let's see what that looks like. And that could be my other hinge. Or I could put it the same way. No, that looks rubbish. I'll put my hinge that way. And I want them to look kind of organic and messy, so I'll probably unfurl it a little. I don't know. Most people plan ahead what they're going to do, don't they? But not me. So, a couple of little dots there for me. That's probably not as flat as it could be. Alright, they look a bit mad, but they're my hinges. So if you look at these, they look a tiny bit mad, don't they? But you get the idea. I'm going to move this one. When you do this, clay is pretty forgiving. You can do lots of different things with it. That probably looks a bit better. Yeah. Okay, let's look at that. It's a bit more spaced. But you get the idea. If we look at the original ones again, I had a bit more time with those. Now, the other thing we need to do is to make a doorknob. And for that, there's a cat jumping around now. So if a huge shadow goes across the door, it's the shadow of a cat. Gizmo, seriously. I want to make a base for the doorknob. Let's have a look. The trouble with this gold clay is it's gone very soft. I put my doorknob, it's not halfway up, it's a little bit above halfway up. And then if I just roll something for the middle, you have to play around really with amounts on this. You don't want to get blue clay on your gold. That's a big hint. Okay. Come on. There. Put my doorknob on there, and I'm going to give it quite a big flatten because I don't want it sticking out a tremendous amount from the book. I don't think that's in anyone's interest. And just give it a little push in the middle with a ball tool. This makes a funny little doorknob. So there we have our kind of door. And now what we need is the grey granite clay. Now any grey would do really. Any grey will do really, sorry. But I'm fortunate that I've got some Fimo granite clay here. And so I'm going to use this to make the outside of the door. And if you have an extruder, you could probably extrude a long sausage of clay, snake of clay, but I don't want to use my extruder today because I'm showing people how to do things by hand. You want to roll it out, not too thick because you don't want it to be too fat for the door and too fat for the book, and just lay that around the edge of your door. I think that bit there is still a little bit too fat, so keep playing with it until you're happy. And just lay this snake of clay around the door like that. Now I'm going to trim it, but I'm not going to join it together yet, because once you start to mark it into little stones, you will find that it sort of grows in length, the hair there. There's one thing, clayers hate its hairs. I'll try with a bit of tape, but other than that, oh, that's fine. Otherwise I'd leave it until it was baked and get it off after. Okay, so that's in position now, and I'm going to get this tool, but you could use, I don't know, you could use that bit of cardboard again if you wanted, and just go around and divide this grey piece up into little stones. Or bricks, I don't know, granite bricks. By now we're starting to see that things aren't entirely even, but it really is a fantasy object, so, you know, we're not architects here, we're having fun. Not meaning to suggest that architects can't have fun, I'm sure they can. So there's the door. This comes along to the end. And to there, it kind of joins up. And I will show you that closer. So there's our door. Now what I would probably do is put a second layer of these around, because it gives us more space when we're working. And when I put my second layer around, I would put the bricks, I would stagger them with the others. So even though they're not terribly even, we can still stagger them, and I'll show you that a bit closer. See how that's staggered so it looks more like it's been built. So that's how you make the door. And if you're fortunate enough to have some mica powders or some gold eyeshadow, just to smooth onto these little gold bits before you bake it, so much the better, because it'll give it more of a gleam. Gold clay, not very shiny. We only want to bake this for about 10 minutes, because we're going to come back when it's finished, and then we're going to do the entire bake, and the entire bake will be to the manufacturer's instructions. But ahead of time, we're just going to pop this in for 10 minutes. I'm doing this on a tile. I'd advise you to do the same, or maybe some baking paper on top of a metal tray or something, but you know, something you can put in the oven without moving your door around too much. Always with the accidents. Okay, in the words of the BBC children's programme Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. This is a door I made earlier. It's a bit bigger than the one I've just showed you, and it's white. Oh, I know what I forgot to say. You can put a charm on your door. This door here, I thought perhaps a little, that little charm there is gorgeous, isn't it? It's a it's an anchor. Look at that. And just push that into the clay and see if it will stick. Now if it doesn't stick, you might want to pop it out at the end and put a bit of super glue on it and shove it back in to the gap. But because you have that little loop at the top and everything, sometimes you'll find that that will stay in on its own. And isn't that sweet? You can make a sort of beach themed one. Back to the job in hand. Okay, so this is a different one. It's got a little dragonfly charm on it. And as you can see here, I've been preparing all sorts of good things to go on the door. Now if I was a proper designer and had been properly educated, I'd probably have made some kind of plan as to what I wanted my door to look like. And I have kind of made a plan, but I haven't made a drawing. So what I've done is I've made lots of little leaves and shapes and flowers and middles. I've used flower cutters for my flowers. These are incredibly cheap and you can order them from everywhere, and they come from China usually, I think. Or you can get things in a cake decorating shop. These are more expensive. They're metal and they're super little things, and I paid for it and I thought it was a bit dear, but this and this, I've used them so much, I really have, so they were well worth it. And I'll tell you what they are down below, actually, in the description, because the name has completely gone out of my brain. Also, I cut a piece of a strip from the top of a cat food tin and folded it over to make a leaf cutter, which I didn't use this time because I had that one and this one's a bit small. But you know, you can improvise tools, but do be careful because you'll probably cut yourself. To decorate this, I'm going to use the flowers that I've made. I'm going to use the leaves that I've made, and I'll show you how I did those. These leaves here I made I'm just going to ruin one now just so I can show you. Just get a ball of green, roll it around on your palm, press down on one end so that you end up with that kind of teardrop shape. Press the teardrop shape, and then with my knife, I use the kitchen knife actually, press into the middle, and then I'm using this because it's easier. Make the little spines, and I made these really quite close together because I was trying to make my leaves look different to one another. So there you go. There's a leaf. The small leaves, I used a leaf cutter, and I just rolled the pasta through the pasta machine on the number 3 or on the 2 layers of box if you're using a roller, and then I just put a little line in the end of it so that they look different. Now that we've done that, we can use some liquid clay and a brush and literally just go through popping all these things onto the door in a design of our own choice. And I've started a little bit here. I've made curly twists of the 2 greens that I'm using, and I'm using that with a couple of leaves. I like my leaves to point up towards the top, so each side the leaves go up towards the top, and then when they get to the top they sort of arch over and meet. I'm going to leave the bottom clear so it's like a kind of step, and I think we can make this door look really pretty. I don't expect you to sit through me decorating the entire door because I think that would not be fun, but I will do a little bit of it for you. Now, to me this is the most fun part, but it's also the part that really is most time consuming, and I don't know, I like to keep doing it, changing it, going back. And with this liquid clay, you know, it's you can do that. You can take it off and put it back on again if you want to be a little bit careful, obviously. Lots of curly things. This is where if you don't have curly hinges, you can, you know, do you know what I mean? You can put curly plants and they look like they're a contrast to the rest of it. If you have curly hinges, it might be a bit too much. The colours I've mixed, I've got blue for the small flowers, I've got purple for the big flowers, and this third colour is a mixture of the blue and the purple, and that's quite a good way to do things, so you know your colours are going to kind of go together because they are actually related to one another. And I think that's a good way for it to do it. Cindy Leitz has got a good section on her Polymer Clay Tutor channel on mixing colours, and that's the kind of advice that she gives, which is, you know, excellent advice. And put that there. Let's have a couple of these small leaves. I've got an Instagram account, so I think what I might do is put a picture of this when it's finished onto Instagram. If you're watching this in the future, it might be too late for you to look. If you're watching it in August of 2016, you'll probably find it. I made the little middles for the flowers. I made thin sausages and then cut them up into tiny balls, because that's the easiest way to make sure that the balls are a similar size, because you want the flowers to look similar to one another, otherwise it'll look weird. And I find with the tiny ones, like the blue ones, you probably want to put a couple all together, because that's more how they grow. I'll just put some liquid clay on that. It's important to keep remembering your liquid clay, because that does make it stick when it's baked. It's unbelievable to hear me being so quiet, isn't it? Let's have a look. Maybe I'll put one of these here. No, maybe I won't, too busy. There. Oh yeah. Okay, so you can see how, oops, stick. You can see how this is progressing, and it's making it quite pretty. I don't think there's much to be gained by me carrying on with this now, because you've seen what we're doing. I will put a picture of it on Instagram. If you've got any questions, do ask me. If I've forgotten anything, I'll put it in the description. But basically this is the idea. This is what this is the sort of thing we were doing. On this one, actually, I used a Swarovski crystal and not a charm. And yeah, I hope that's given you some ideas. And when we stick this to the book, I use this. I'm in the UK and I use Crafter's Pick, the ultimate glue, which I spread on a bit on the book and a bit on my fairy door, and let them dry a little bit, then put them together like a contact adhesive. That was fantastic. This stuff is magical. So if you're in the UK, I'd recommend this. If you're in the US, I think you can get it in the UK too. There's a glue called E6000, which some very talented journal cover makers have recommended to me. And also I know a lot of people use super glue, just ordinary super glue. I hope that's inspired you. If you enjoyed this video, do subscribe, do like the video, do tell your friends and share. Leave some comments down below, and I will see you again another time. Thank you very much. Bye bye.